Sayeed Ferdous, my namesake, because I'm also a Professor Ferdous. He's a professor of anthropology originally at BRAC University, but who completed his PhD in history from the University of Paris. So he is a follower of the original anthropologist amongst his historians. He's keeping up the tradition of anthropologists, wandering through the arena of history. Let's just keep everyone coming. He's coming. He's coming. The wonderful addition to our audience, which are composed mainly of our students now, which will be good for us. So an anthropologist amongst historians, he is also somebody who has wandered into the arena of university administration as the pro-vice chancellor of the university in Bangladesh. So we will perhaps say a lot about how we administer these studies. So Professor Sayeed Ferdous, as he says in his introduction to himself in the profile, says he finds his niche in the blurred zone of history and anthropology. So this kind of multidisciplinary will be talking about he also goes on to say that his research interests includes studies, memory, the supporters, post-colonialization, state and national. His 2000 has been created, impacts the lives of the people living there, as well as what it means for the newly formed state of Pakistan in those days to consolidate itself through administrative measures such as police and all that, but including what we would call the ISAs, schools, etc. How these are divided, how these are reformed, reformulated. Professor Firdous was part of a Myrtle Institute initiative as well that looked at migrants to Dhaka from India, an initiative that was called Inherited Memories, but I think he took part in the second part of the because I had the pleasure of writing the introduction to the first part, and that was my personal foray into partition studies, as I read Memories and looked at the very uneven area of migration and resettlement. So today's talk, which is entitled Listening to the Partitioned Others and Awkwardness in Illegibility, will, I hope, lead us to unexplored lands. Dr. Firdous has opened up the arena of partition studies to us and brought an intricate and sophisticated analysis, and we hope that the portrait of the mind that he will bring here, the mental landscape as he calls it, will make us wander into the realm of the uncanny as the familiar becomes unfamiliar, and as familiar suddenly is very strangely familiar when we look at it. So with all of this, we are going to wander into, I hope, I know, unexplored territories of the mind, of creativity, of the arts, as the two sides of the world struggle to understand and communicate. Is that a proper of your titles?
I think no, I really struggle to get that like
high standards.
Set by Firdous. Yeah.
But I hope I have not misled the audience who
No,
expected. Thank you very much. So with that, I hand it over to Professor Ferdous, who will speak from there.
Thank you, everyone. This is a time when I looked at my work. My fieldwork was done in 2012. As an anthropologist, fieldwork is something we really look for. And then I worked in the archive. But it's more than a decade. And I'm still talking based on that research, I'm still talking, and research is a kind of thing that evolves over the year, but it doesn't evolve necessarily over a decade. So I really now feel that urge to go back to the empirical or to the archive once again, or dig into the things from a different approach and different angles. So when I got this invitation, I was thinking, what would I say? I keep saying the same thing over and over again. In the last decade, almost last 10 years, I've been talking. My first presentation after completion of my PhD was in 2015, and since then, it's just a decade. Since then, I'm talking over and over the same thing. It sounds, but I can see that on its way, it's evolving, it's shifting. The focus is changing. I really find I pull along particular strings that were not present in the initial days, and I can see them through my works, through my own lecture and analysis and feedback from the audience. So that's what I keep thinking. Now, today when I say listening to partition others and awkwardness of illegibility, what I want to say is basically partition studies use a cliche. Often in partition studies, one would encounter the cliche of partition of mind. What does that mean? Partition of mind means that partition was not only took place on the cartography. It was not a physical or material thing, but it actually affects our, as we say in the conference title, Memoryscape, it affects our thoughts and language, it affects our theories and articulation, it affects our remembrance and forgetting. So I was thinking that partition of mind works in a very, like in our intersubjective relation with the researcher and the research, with the researcher and the audience. When we make, as a researcher, when we make an encounter, and when it get feedback from the audience or from my research population, often we encounter people with some kind of awkwardness, some kind of strangeness, and that strangeness I have felt first time during my fieldwork, but then over and over again when I presented in, I can remember another session like this, another keynote session in Siliguri a few years back when I was presenting there, and the audience was kind of, because my thesis, my PhD, one of the central theses of my PhD is I question that this idea of Indocentrism, that partition studies is very much Indocentric. It's all about focusing India at the center, India as a nation state at the center, and keeping that in center, we are making our narrative, so we are elaborating our narratives. So I say that we need to go beyond the Indocentric approach. And then I was explaining what I really mean by Indocentrism. So I mean by Indocentric, like partition research primarily focus on Punjab, less on Bengal. When they focus on Bengal, they focus primarily on Calcutta, less on Morijhapi or less on Dhaka. So I was talking about, particularly from my upbringing, I was talking about the erasure of East Bengal, erasure of Bangladesh in partition studies. And I was saying that this is historical, that West Bengal and East Bengal, we often say that we often celebrate united or trans-border Bengaliness. But in reality, I can see that historically, the fault line had always been there, and even before the partition. So when I was raising these things, I can feel that my Shiliguri audience is in discomfort. Like they were not necessarily denying it wholesale, but they were saying that, well, Calcutta is, the snobbery of Calcutta is not only toward East Bengal, but Calcutta also marginalizes us, Calcutta also erases us out, which is true. But then, we also have to consider that there is this, we should take into account the border making, we should take into account that Dhaka and Calcutta is now under two nation states, and that relationship between the nation states complicated the relationship between Dhaka and Calcutta and West Bengal and East Bengal. So, when I was they were, but they can feel that there is merit in my argument, but there was some kind of awkwardness, there was some kind of shock. And then there was this idea of, like my thesis was saying, that it's all about, partition is kind of a saga of sadness, of loss. It's a monopolization of loss. But why don't we look that the other part of partition was jubilation. Jubilation of and making of Muslim identity, Muslim middle class in East Bengal. And why partition studies hardly look into that. And then that raises question to many others, particularly from other side, Oipare, the other side. People keep thinking, well, this guy, is he talking about some kind of celebration of Muslim identity? Is he kind of promoting some kind of Muslim narratives of partition, or Bangladeshi, some kind of Bangladeshi brand nationalist statist narrative, which my work never aimed to do that. Like my work was basically also questioning how partition and the events afterwards shaped the Hindus in Bangladesh and shaped the Biharis in Bangladesh. And particularly the case of Hindus, partition studies talk about departing Hindus. Partition studies talk about leaving Hindus from East Bengal. But they hardly look into the Hindus who didn't want to leave, who couldn't leave, who opted to live in Dhaka or Bangladesh. So what about them? They stayed in their ancestral land for various reasons, including personal, emotional, political, or economic reasons. They opted to stay here. And then, after partition, they suddenly discovered them as a minority in their own homeland. And then after 71, they had this hope that now a secular nationalism is here and things will be different. But unfortunately, we know Bangladesh never fulfilled that promise to them. So this is interesting, that why partition studies? When I talk about the when I talk about the suffering of the Hindus, like previously in my critique to Indocentrism or my critique to the India-centric approach toward partition, many people from Bangladesh would applaud and will find that this is a celebratory thing. And then they discovered that, but this guy is also talking about the Hindus who are stuck in East Bengal. And they find, okay, that's something different. And that's an awkward thing for them. Then there is this issue of the Biharis, and the role of the Biharis. About 71, we keep saying that they are the villains in 71 history. But what happened in 71 toward them? What Bengalis did to the Biharis in 71. So why not? Like they came with a high hope that they are coming. They had to leave India. They looked for a new land for the Muslims. They came to the East Bengal. They never went. Most of the Biharis couldn't opt for West Pakistan because that was a stranger land to them. But in East Bengal, they have these long trajectories for livelihood. Like Biharis came to this land long before the partition. So when partition had taken place, they thought that they would go into East Bengal and make a new Muslim land. And soon after their arrival, not even a decade, they discovered that the rise of Bengali nationalism here. And they become, again, their identity here become again villainized, criminalized, and then there is this power struggle and those things. So in no way my work satisfied, like no researcher would do that, my work satisfied across the board audience. So there are questions, there are awkwardness, there are suspicion. And some would say, some definitely was very kind to me, but then there are others who say that is this another mullah narrative from Bangladesh coming to encounter the so-called Indocentrism? Is this another mullah narrative from Bangladesh? Why he need to, what point he's making is okay, but why he need to pick India? So this I didn't find in person. This I didn't encounter in person, but when under my lectures on YouTube, the threads, if you go through that, people are coming all these interesting comments. Why you have to unnecessarily pick India? And then they find that, okay, so you are denying that the Hindus have to sacrifice in 47. No, I'm not. But I'm saying that this is not the only narrative of partition. Definitely, the Muslims in East Bengal had the blood and tears of Hindus in their hand in 47. There is no question of denying that. But making that partial story, the whole story of partition, is problematic. So that was my point. So, but people don't like, some people do not like the fact that, okay, so you are basically raising the Muslim perspective, you are raising the East Bengal perspective, and that means you are actually denying the Hindu perspective or suffering of the Hindu. And then there is this often nationalistically charged comments like ungratefulness of Bangladeshis, which is, I'm sure that most of the people in this room know, that Bangladesh should ever be grateful to India, that India played an instrumental role for the liberation of this country. So we should be grateful. And why? And then there is this secular progressive audience, a section of audience, who raises this question that why you are bringing up this stuff now? Like, is this another attempt to divide the nation? Are you going to promoting religiously or communally charged part of stories, and you are trying to bring them in forth, and then you are actually, because to keep the nation integrated, we have to stay to something that people preferred, that they thought that being secularist, progressive, and is the best thing, and they couldn't see that how that narrative actually excludes many other narratives as well. So these awkwardness, these things had taken place with my work. I encountered that in-person seminars, and there was this a very reputed singer who worked in the field of partition studies, who just completed her PhD in partition studies or border making, and she had joined in one of my book talks, and then she questioned there that the question I already shared with you, that are you promoting some kind of Bangladeshi nationalism or Bangladesh-based nationalism against Indocentrism? So I asked her to go through my pages, and you will find the story is not that simple, and I am questioning every other aspect. So now, where from these things come? As I say, this is this awkwardness, this discomfort, this suspicion, or this what should I say? This is a part of the historical process of othering, as anthropologists say, making people other. So this is a process of otherization. In the process of state, particularly state and nation making, we are talking about 1947 partition, which is state making, nation making, which is border making. That has straight relationship with identity politics. So any battle on the ground of identity politics actually led us to this awkwardness, to this suspicion. And that affects people on both sides of the border, but not only on both sides of the border, but it also affects people within the same border. Right, so when I was interviewing, when I was conducting my field research, I can see at certain point, my interlocutors who are non-Muslim don't want to talk about 47. Because for them, the interviewer is someone who is from the dominant ethnic group, Bengali Muslim. So what's the point of digging that old wound and saying something that wouldn't fit with the dominant canonical hegemonic narrative? And if that doesn't fit with that, what's the point of dragging some potential danger or dragging to themselves into some potential danger? So I can see the avoidance, denial to talk from my Hindu interlocutors. Same with the Biharis. When we asked them, I wanted them to talk about 1971. It's a similar thing. What's the point of saying, like, so when Anam Zakaria, the Pakistani writer and popular, she writes she writes in the field of academic and both the academic and non-academic genre. So Anam Zakaria was writing in her piece, and she was saying that in Bangladesh, all the histories of 71 starts from the night of 25th March, which is the massacre of the Bengalis. But Bengalis hardly say what they did to the Biharis till 23rd of March. So this is interesting. We know that it's not, history is not that simple, that it's not one-sided. We all know that. We are mature enough, we read this far, that we know that no nationalist history is enough. They don't say it all. But still, when I read Anam only a few years ago, and I find, well, what actually happened before 23rd of March? And if we know that history books, official history, official narratives, and our family stories hardly match. Go to your nanny, go to your daddy, go to your grandma, and ask about 71. What they will say, that will hardly meet the narration of the official textbook. So why there is this gap? So this is interesting that after reading Anam, I was thinking, like, why? Even me, I was aimed for, I was committed to do a subaltern historiography of 1971 initially. The project finally ended up this in 1947. So I was thinking that why even I even do not acknowledge enough or read enough or dig enough about the suffering, about what happened to the Biharis immediate before 25th of March. Why the histories? We know why the histories in Bangladesh never say about that. So what I was saying, talking, this awkwardness is inevitable. This uncomfort, this awkwardness, this illegibility. Like when I was talking, I'm talking like in Bangladesh and West Bengal, we even speak the same vernacular almost, like we can understand each other's vernacular, and we share the same language. We share many cultural and cultural capitals in our. So it's interesting, even after that, why they struggle to accept what I'm saying about Indocentrism. Why the denial of why the Bihari or Hindu interlocutors couldn't trust me. I'm an outsider. I went there for field research. I was assuring, but what's the point? Because the category is there. The social category is there, the power relation is there, the unequal relationship is there, and that contributes to the making of knowledge, that contributes to the epistemology, that contributes to the methodology of research. Why don't we go up to that? So I was talking about that this thing, like, it's not only about 47. After 47, it was 1971. And then, this is this long July in 2024. In this July, we stand against the regime, against the past regime. We stand against the autocrat. And we know that we are not homogeneous. We know those who stood here are diverse, divergent. They came from divergent political training, orientation, different social upbringing. And then it was not the matter until the removal of the autocrat. And when it's done, then the diversity, the divergent feature become a challenge to accommodate. Now we are in battle with whether this would go to the far right, whether this would go to the extreme Islamist, whether this would go to liberal Islamist, whether this will go to not Islamist but pro-Islamist, but and okay to accommodate secular Bangladeshi nationalism, or it will go to, or the last stalwarts of the left politics there, the last elements of the left politics there, would this go to there? So now, we cannot even talk to each other. The illegibility is there. The awkwardness is there. A few weeks before, or a few months before, we were okay to say that what's the point of saying that Abu Said is Jamaat? That doesn't allow, that doesn't give it legitimacy to kill someone. Just because of his political orientation, you are not supposed to kill someone. We could say that, and knowing that my politics is not pro-Jamaati politics. But I asserted that during those days. But now, when things are over, we need to negotiate with each other. We need to look forward. We need to build the nation. The identity politics is there. Like in 71, it was the state making and nation making. In 47, it was the state making and nation making. In long July 2024, it's not state and nation making. It's basically making of the nation again, not state making, but making of the nation again. So the identity politics is there. And that awkwardness and discomfort is there. So my question is, how would we deal with this diversity? How would we transcend this thing? The only way, there is no shortcut, there is no easy way. The only way is to believe that this is a land for all. The only way is to promote that this is a land for all. But why would everyone would agree with that? Some is ready to say that this is our land and we will only survive here on our terms. This is where the critical thinkers, this is where the academia need to intercept. This is what they should say out loud. This is their point to say, like, this should be a land for male, female, and third gender. This is a land for Muslim, but this is a land for non-Muslim. This is a land for Bengali, but equally this is a land for a non-Bengali, Chapman, Man, or even smallest of the ethnic groups. It's their land too. So why wouldn't think like the exclusionary politics, actually the exclusionary identity politics will take us nowhere. So when we struggle to overcome this illegibility, we overcome to face this awkwardness, because we cannot transcend our own niche. We cannot transcend what we have learned as truth. We reside within the comfort, with our own comfort zone. We reside within our own hegemonic dominant canonical narratives. We reside within our own nationalist, gender, sexualized politics. We reside within that. And when we reside within that, how would we transcend? The only way, I think, is to allow everyone to accommodate, to aim for. When I was making critique of Indocentrism, definitely I was not talking about some Bangla centrism. I was talking about incorporating every other voices of partition that had remained unheard. That voice could be from Assam, from Karimganj, that voice could be from Chittagong Hill Tracts, that voice could be from Morinchapi, that voice could be from that small town of Hili where I conducted my field research. So, by challenging Indocentrism, it's not compensatory as well. Methodologically, I'm not talking about a compensatory approach. It's not compensatory, but to accommodate. It's not compensatory, but to accommodate every other diverse narratives. So, and that would definitely give the researcher a safeguard. I think if you can follow me, if you aim to accommodate the diverse narrative as a researcher, if you accept, as a researcher, if you learn to address your frustration, because you engaging with your research work or field research, or as an anthropologist, I talk too much about field work. When you go and talk to the people, you have your own expectation. You have something in your mind that you want to listen to this. So, when I started this research, I had in my mind that partition is about nostalgia. And then my entire thesis said something else. People said something else. One of my interlocutors in Hili Bazaar said, "Oh, you are looking for nostalgia. We didn't have that much." So it's interesting. After 6 months of field work, he was saying that to us. He was saying that after partition, they have good amount of money by exchanging lands, because land on the other side was more valuable. So they had more money, and they had a new beginning, and they had a high hope. So it was not nostalgia initially. So it's interesting. It's not that simple or clear-cut thing. Definitely there are mixed matches. Definitely there are elements of nostalgia. Definitely there are pains and suffering of leaving the ancestral place or many other things. But at the same time, people also have other things. And when I struggled, I was not ready to listen to that answer. Someone else told me. I actually lead the person to a certain direction. I was asking him, well, you have seen 3 different periods, like you have seen the British, you have seen the Pakistanis, and now you see Bangladesh. So which one you prefer? Which one is yours? Which one you would say yours? And that person said, Bangladesh is mine, Pakistan was mine too. So this is interesting. I was never ready to accept that. For me, Pakistan could never be my place. I had those nationalist bias. And being the researcher, facing those awkwardness and learn to reconfigure. I teach about beyond national. I teach to go beyond nationalism to my students. But even then, after all these years, during my fieldwork, I find it awkward when he says that Pakistan is mine and Bangladesh is mine. And then this person says this interesting story that during the last days of 71, he was staying on the other side of the Hili, which is Indian Hili. So the Pakistani soldiers surrendered, and they were arrested, and they were taken in the convoy was passing through the hilly bazaar, and some local people was throwing stones or throwing something to them, and this guy couldn't accept that. He was like, why would you throw stone to them? Like, it's our enemy, we would fight. Then he has in mind that why an Indian / Hindu would throw stone to a Pakistani soldier. They are our enemy, but that doesn't allow the Indians to throw stone to them. This dilemma had always been there. But Bengali Muslim in East Bengal and Bangladesh had always struggled with this hyphenated identity. Dina Siddiqui said it's double burden of identity. They always, like, whether celebrating Pahela Boishakh would be very anti-Islamist, whether a rally for Palestine would be too Islamist, the dilemma of Bengali Muslim had always been there. Now, this awkwardness, if we don't address, what I was saying a while ago, wherefrom I get diverted, I said that this is the dilemma, this divergence of the, like, every process is divergent and covering this divergence or accommodating this divergence, address the awkwardness, would only give you safeguard as a researcher. What kind of safeguard? Like what happened to my case. People try to label me, and if they really go through my text, they will find that label doesn't work. They find that I am critiquing Indocentrism. That doesn't mean that I am critiquing and I am denying that we had shared cultural or imaginary world in our upbringing days. We have shared cultural things across the border. When we are talking about, when I am critiquing about Indocentrism, I am not promoting any Bangladeshi brand of nationalism. I am also talking about how nation states actually creates its own others and treat the others in a very derogatory way. So, if someone would want me to label as mullah, I would say that I have talked about the Hindus and their sufferings in East Bengal as well. I recognize the historical responsibilities of the Bengali Muslim. And I also say what happened after 47 toward the Hindus during the Pakistani period, after 1971 till today, what is happening to the minorities, religious minorities on this land. I have no problem to acknowledge that. And then one would say that I am probably like too much against against Bangladesh, like why I am talking about the Biharis. But I am also talking about, or someone would find me as Muslim, biased to the Muslims or promoting the Muslim identity. But I'm talking about the Hindu identities as well. So there are contradictory experiences of the same population. It's not that a West Bengali intellectual or a friend, a West Bengali colleague would fail to understand my language. But this is also in the same academia when we are all passing through the same corridor. My colleague here would get me wrong because of our different orientation, different understanding, and different politics. So the best thing is try to map out all the diversities and try to put them on paper. And if we really map out the diversity and acknowledge the diversity, it's not, we have to understand that when I critique about Indocentrism, I say I was critiquing a hegemonic approach toward history. When I was critiquing Indocentrism, it's not, the evil is not India. When I'm critiquing the Indocentrism, the evil is the way the epistemic violence had taken place, that by South Asian studies, we are talking about basically the colonial India or post-colonial India. We hardly heard other voices in South Asian studies. We hardly heard voices from peripheries of South Asia. So my point is, that to raise different voices, to accommodate multiple voices, to accommodate contradictory voices, the voice that you necessarily do not own, but the voice is there in the society. So why not accommodate that? Why not address that? If the people in Bangladesh now decided that they will vote for the mullahs and the land will be for mullahs, you can feel bad, but you have to accept that. That's what people want. And if the mullahs decided, like Sheikh Hasina did, Sheikh Hasina decided that they will play with this identity of mullah in one hand, like play with the Hifazat and Islamic Shashan Tantra Andolon, and then on the other hand, Sheikh Hasina would say that like promote some kind of Islamophobic politics in Bangladesh. And other mullahs would say that you can wear this dress, you can do that, you can do this, you can roam around on Pahela Boishakh, and if we find a couple, we will get them married. If they're going to materialize that, they will get their return. But why don't, as a researcher, as an academic, as a scholar, it's our responsibility to address every voices, as far as possible, to count every voices that prevails in the society. Bring them next to each other. Lay them next to each other. We can talk about which one is hegemonic here and which one is not. And subscribing the hegemonic voice gives you some kind of conformity, some kind of sense of assurance. You are comfortable with that. That happened with the Bangladeshi secularists. They find a comfort zone. But that is also exclusionary. You can't see that. So, in one hand, you really have to question or challenge the point of addressing every possible divergent and contradictory perspectives, put them on the table together next to each other, is basically dismantling a dominant hegemonic canonical narrative. Our task as a scholar is that. And our task to think about the future of Bangladesh after this long July. We really have to give up our comfort zone. We really have to transcend our own comfort zone and ask questions beyond and address the perspective beyond. Of course, you can question the politics of the other. Of course, you can question of any other effort of bringing up a new hegemony. You should challenge, you should question the new effort of bringing up a new, against the Bengali hegemony. If someone promotes a new Islamist hegemony, hegemony of the Khilafat, you can challenge that. You can question that. But at the same time, you have to remember that that person is also entitled to this land. Just because his politics is entirely against you, that doesn't give you the right to push them outside the land. We have no right to push anybody. We have no right to say this is our land. This is everyone's land. This is our land, but this is everyone else's land. This is other people's land as well. I know this is more about theoretical. In practice, I know this sounds like utopia, but identity politics otherwise would take us nowhere. After this long July, we should accept that this nationalism, how broad they pretend to be, they are narrow. How inclusive they want to be, they are narrow. Identity politics is narrow. The self-proclaimed inclusivity of the July masterminds, miserably failed in the last few months. We should question that. That in the name of inclusivity, are you basically promoting some kind of exclusionary politics again? But at the same time, this is our task, to engage with the awkward. This is our task, to engage with the unknown. After partition, the Hindu guy in Hili Bazar said that it was a strange time, known people become unknown. That happens during the moment of rupture. That happens. That happened in Long July as well. After this Long July, known faces become unknown to you. But we need to acknowledge them. We need to understand that. We need to address them. We need to acknowledge them. I think I am too much repetitive already. I should bring an end here. Thank you.
Thank you so much for the very honest, brave, and open analysis of how we other people, and just at the moment of otherization, the other becomes illegible to us, and also it's awkward. But as you said, the practical side is too much. I want to bring it to even more theoretical point, not theoretical, academic point. When we think about academia and academic practice in the subcontinent, it has been very Indo-centric. South Asia has come to equal India for many, many years. And now, I think events like this conference for one, and events like the Long July kind of make us come back to other parts of South Asia where politics, culture, etc. are being debated and discussed and lived in other ways. So here I would like us to talk about South Asia studies, and I want to do that. And remember all the strangenesses and the strangers that we have created amongst ourselves. The border that was made is not just a Radcliffe line. It's also the borders that we have ideologically created among us, borders that separate us because of our political standpoints and views, our religious practices and beliefs, even the way we dress and all of that. We create divisions. And how do we talk and how do we bring these divisions closer? One of my favorite things is to always say that when we think of South Asia, we should think of us at one periphery of South Asia, somehow straddling southeast, south, northeast, and maybe it's in this very liminal region that South Asia exists, that with all its differences, its ups and downs, its fractures, and its unities. So maybe, as Dr. Firdous was saying, that studying the partitions of the mind that have been created, the otherizing of people that have been created, will be wonderful. So thank you very much for thought-provoking and bringing us from 47 to 2024 and 2025. So the floor is now everyone's. Nazim.
There are a lot of questions that are what you have said. Try to focus on a couple of them. First thing is, who writes matters. Indians write far more than us. Indian Bengalis even more so. I studied at Oxford. Most of the material I was finding written by Indians. So if you don't tell your story, no one else will. That's one factor. The other is, of course, it's also related to power relations, access to information, resources in your country and abroad. They're the ones who get far more scholarships than we do, even in terms of proportion, country proportion, state proportion, and so on. So there is that inequality in access.
Historical.
Exactly. And we have inherited that, and that undermines our position. Right? I was just sharing that story with you when I went to Oxford. I hadn't done Indian history. And there were these Indian blokes been my age or a bit older, they knew everything, and I felt so stupid. I had to read up, 20 times more to get to the same level. So that is an obstruction which many of us face. And even today, I have this very young Indian colleague who is working on Bengal Muslims. And I said, you guys are going to write our history because we're not doing this kind of study.
No,
right? I mean, the kind of painstaking research that needs to be done, we shirk away from it. So we have to take responsibility, really. So it is about power relations, but not entirely. But on the other hand, I would have to say that we have to struggle harder to get to the same level. And it's not easy because of our circumstances. We also pull back one another instead of encouraging them. Right? Up from that, the issue of, maybe I don't want to speak too much. If somebody else is raring to go, I'll sit down, but I have a couple of more
points. I would like to respond to your observation. Yes, you are absolutely right. There is this historical differences, and there is this, particularly in the field of language and literature, there is this effort from East Bengal to claim East Bengali literature that is not Calcutta-centric. Like for Mazhar, like Ibadur Rahman, like when Ibadur wrote this book named Puru Banglar Bhasha, they tried to say that language and literature in this Bengal should be different. But then, Farhad Mazhar, not subscribing his political things, but Farhad Mazhar was fascinating in saying the particular thing that, look, we have to work. It's the same thing, like, where is our parallel? If we want to make a parallel or compare, where is our work? Where is our share of what we have done so far? So that is, your point is completely valid, and there is this historical equality. But at the same time, the dominant narrative in partition studies was about the exodus of the non-Muslims from East Bengal. East Bengal had never been in partition studies. The only tailor-made way East Bengal was present is the departure of the non-Muslims from East Bengal. I say this is true, but this is only half true, partial true. Because there are many other stories. People also came from West Bengal or other parts from India to East Bengal, and that story is not here. Now you say that this is our task to write. True, but our scholars, when they engage into that, I'm not talking about the literary work. Literature and film and creative genre allows much liberty, and they actually sometimes did a commendable job. But historians, political scientists, anthropologists, or sociologists had done almost nothing new. They just adopted that Indo-centric paradigm because that fits with their secular progressive niche. That narrative fits with very well, that it's about the suffering of the minorities, and they just wholesale adopted. They didn't say about the transformation here. Why couldn't they see? Because the dominant narrative is there about the departing non-Muslims. My father, or your family actually formed as a class during those periods. My father became principal of almost 60-year-old college in Bangladesh, even before he was 36. How that had happened? Because all the senior Hindu professors had gone to the other side. So the transformation, the opportunity for Bengali Muslim, the jubilation of Bengali Muslim was there. It's not a simple story. Definitely at the rise of my father, there was the tears of the departing Hindu professors. Yeah. It's complicated. It's complicated. But there are other versions of the history already we are living with, but our scholars fail to address them. Our scholars specifically chosen.
I don't fully blame them, because there's another factor.
No, I'm not blaming you.
I want to say, because there are obstacles. So again, I give my example, and I'm sure other people have that. So if my supervisor had his way, I'd be doing partition, and I'd have to spend half the time just dispelling what other people have written about it. There are thousands of stuff written all by Indians from a particular perspective. And I didn't want to get trapped into arguing against all of that. So I said, no, I'll tell my own story, I set my own agenda. And that's what we got to do. It's not that I didn't do partition, but I did it from a different angle. So it's not the story of partition that I'm doing the story of Bengal Muslims. In that context, then, I bring that in. Right? So there are ways that we have to be creative about it. And I must say that my supervisor was very skeptical about which way I was going, but he kept quiet. That was one good thing. He didn't say, let's see what she does. And finally, he was pleased.
Yeah, it was similar. I shared with you that the subaltern school, when I joined their cultural studies workshops in India, there was this patronizing tone. Oh, that's fantastic. Someone from Bangladesh is doing a work on partition. But would you be able to do that? Like, because this is the storyline in their mind, and they find that to reproduce that storyline from Bangladesh would be difficult. And I was like, but things are going in a different direction. So it's interesting. I acknowledge your point of historical inequality and how that affects, how that makes our task difficult. But that doesn't mean that we should move away from that direction.
I just make one other point, and I will let anybody else see what they want. This thing of the double burden that you raise, and a lot of people raise it, I find it not quite serious enough to say. You know why? Because every community, in every country has that. You have your religion, you have your political identity, you have your social identity. So what's so new about us? What's so different about us? One thing is different, we were colonized, and the British made us think in a certain way. So we come to the idea of the colonization of the mind, right? So we tend to reproduce some of those ideas and accept those categories for ourselves. I've thought about it a lot because I've worked on that point. And I say we must reject that. Because why are we so special? I mean, Pakistanis are Muslims and Pakistanis and Punjabi and whatever else, right? Iranis are Iranian and whatever.
No, the only sentence I would say here, I'm not disagreeing with you totally, but yes, I still play up in that argument. And so, but why I say that, look, to the West Bengalis, we hardly ever been Bengali enough.
Sure.
And to West Pakistan, we were never been enough Muslim.
Yeah, we reject their views.
So it's interesting. See that we are, because why we rejected? Because part of us wanted to be Bengali, and that disqualified us to the West Pakistan. Part of us wanted to be Muslim, and that disqualified us to the West Bengalis.
Why don't we do it to other people in other countries? Why don't we do it to
the identity politics had always been there. Look at the look at the arch rival two nationalisms in Bangladesh: Bangladeshi nationalism and Bengali nationalism. One is leading toward Islamist or Muslim identity. The other one is promoting like some brand of Bengali nationalism. Okay, lately these have been all conflated in two different shapes. But initially, that was the ideological identity binary. So it was there. So that, you can say.
So thank you so much for a wonderful presentation. Thank you, Prof English, for handling that. So I want your view in the case of Memoryscapes. You mentioned in the later part as well, is that I have been studying social movement in the case of Shaba movement. So both of these movements, in a way, our 2018 movements, are similar and dissimilar at the same time. I really need your insight to help me out. Is that why in the many cases when the projectile of resistance comes through in a particular historical moment, genealogical moment, the sense of identity and force accumulate itself together, and just after a while it disperses. It happens in the case of Ganojagaron Monchos. It is happening in a ways in the many fragmentation of Commonwealth and other parties. So as your master class in the form of identity formation in that cases, is it the legacy of like because of that historical condition of coming from a bigger identity politics to Pakistani, India, Bangladeshi, and so forth, or it's a recent trend that you are finding that really it's not really coming together. What would be your take on that, sir?
I'm not sure whether I'm competent enough to answer that question, particularly to relate these contemporary phenomena with the historical trajectories. But what I would say, like, I would make a clear differentiation between 2013 and 2024.
Yes, sir.
2013, the only similarities in both the movements were that there is this discontent about the regime. Discontent about the regime, and that was that was on the street. The problem is, in 2013, it was completely state-sponsored. The regime sponsored, and they didn't sponsor it with any hide and seek. They overtly showed their sponsorship to that movement, which made 2013 more problematic than that. So in 2013, there was this discontent against the regime, but that was not surfaced. When the organizers on 2013, when there was this question that why shouldn't we raise the question of ethnicity here? Why shouldn't we raise the question of gender here? Then what was their response? Can you remember?
Yes, sir.
The response was Bangla Parikha din amra
Yeah,
Bangla
so we
Parikha
should
din."
be having this
So
question.
we are only hosting this protest
Protest and dealing with
for the war crimes, so for the say 1971 time, and we will deal with that only, and we will not deal with other problems now. We will not address the other problems now. So that was highly problematic. So that was very. If the state didn't put every word on the mouth of the organizer, the thing is on the lips of the organizer. What did the organizers were also pro-regime kind of, a certain section of the organizer. There were middle class poured their heart into that movement. They also were critical about the regime, but the regime played with this hegemony of 1971 war. Like, what is the last Trump card already over consistently had been used, exhausted itself to use this Trump card of 1971. So it was interesting that they used it in that and the movement lost its credibility. And finally the government had to use excessive force to disperse the Shapla Chapter. So 2013 is different. In 2024, I think there was an all-out. Before 2024, there was 2018. 2018, on 2018, already people were on the street. Mothers were on the street. On 2018, school kids were already had blood on their uniforms, and parents were along with them on 2018. On 2024, everyone was out there. Everyone, even loosely pro-regime or army ideological torchbearers. Part of them was also on the street against the injustice. So that was, but what you said, that after the movement, why the forces, that's bound to, because the movement was not a homogeneous group. The movement was not formed by a homogeneous group. There were Islamists, there were Shibi, there were Chakra Shakti, there were Chakra Andolan, Chakra Odhika Parishad, there was Chakra Dal, there were millions of non-partisan students and working class people mostly. Middle class were only at the last leg. Before that, the working class people. So the most interesting thing is they were divergent already. They were all, the only point of agreement was to throw out the regime, like dismantle the regime. That was the only consensus. And they all know that when I say that what's the point that saying that Abu Said is Shibi, that doesn't mean that I'm subscribing to Shibi politics. No. I am against Shibi politics, but that doesn't give them the license to kill Abu Said. So when we say that, we know that there are people whom we don't subscribe. They are comrades on the street for the moment. But after the battle is over, we are all now busy either to calculate our own share in the movement, or probably, if we say in the lenient way, probably they all want to shape Bangladesh into through their comfort narrative or through their preferred way. That's the thing. That makes us to disagree with each other on this point.
It's almost like it happened by accident because they were not really ready for it.
No.
Otherwise, for a proper movement, there would have been a series of ideas which they would have discussed and there would have been an ideological front.
It also happened in the 90s. It also happened in the 90s against Silchar.
So we are
Thank you for this wonderful talk. I was listening to you comment that actually I was thinking of methodologies. You were talking about ordering and also inclusivity on the other end. And since we were talking about people who left the ancestral land, there were also people who opted to live in their ancestral land. It seems, in every academic discussion, we are supposed to exclude some others. Like you, when you talked about Haiti, you left out the Hadipukur area, the open prison in India. You talked about the Hindu majority, and you talked about the Muslims in the bazaar, but you did not mention them. So in our discussions, we are always leaving some people out, right? So is there any particular methodology, since you are an anthropologist, you know better than I do, do you suggest anything that might be more inclusive than what we do?
Being anthropologist doesn't enable you with extra hands. The only thing I can say that it's try to be as much as self-critical you can be to yourself. Try to question yourself. Try to question your discomfort. Don't take any answer as granted, and don't take your comfort as granted or discomfort as granted. That's all we can do. And after that, we still have our limitations.
Hello, sir. My name is Matiba. I'm an anthropology graduate, actually. And I did my undergraduate thesis on non-Bengali Muslims who came into Bangladesh during and after partition. I presented my paper yesterday during one of the panels.
Mine is.
I didn't really work with nostalgia in my paper at all, so it's not really something that I've delved into. But I noticed a trend among my very limited respondent group, and I noticed that people who had come into Bangladesh and sort of had a good life, they didn't really feel any loss. They didn't have nostalgia in that sense. However, people who came here and struggled, they sort of had much more nostalgia for where they grew up and ancestral home. And I was wondering if you had experienced anything like that during your research, or if you saw something like that. Any sort of trend in that sense?
It would be correct to say that there is a similar trend, because every story is kind of different. Every family is different. Every migration experience is different. There are these large, the process could be similar, but then every story has its own dimension. So in some cases, the entire family has come to the terms with partition, and probably they had nothing to say about that. But the old lady, she still misses her childhood friend there. And in her dementia, in the state of dementia, she's talking about that she wants to go back to her childhood friend who's already had died on the other side of the border. For the rest of the family, her dementia and this remembrance hardly get any proper proper attention. Like for them, this is kind of they laugh at her. They find that this is silly. This is like it's a laughing stock, I should say. But they find it. What's the point of saying that? But somehow, partition has had its imprint on people's minds. So it happened. So it's different. Some people remember it very strongly. Some say no. The days there were done. Yes, the house was. There was this typical picture that the river was there. There was this old tree was there, and those were our friends. And this. But then they say that after starting here life, initially it was great, but soon the economic situation was getting worse, and that dream of new Muslim homeland was gradually they lose it from their people. So but it's not a common thing. For some, the nostalgia was there, but for many others, they were celebrating their new child. They were celebrating their new.
Hello, sir. My name is Prof Shafi. I'm from BRAC. I recently finished my master's from English department. So, as the issue of 24 came into the discussion, I got this question after the uprising. Since August, there has been this debate that whether it is a mass uprising or it could be regarded as kind of revolution or something like that. So I would like to know your take on this. And then, as you brought the issue of Gautam Manjar into the discussion, I interviewed him as part of my thesis. And when he described the philosophy of Lalong to me, he also mentioned the thing that you mentioned. In 47, we were not counted as enough nationalist. We were not counted as enough Bengali by the West Bengal, and in 71 we were not counted as enough Muslim by the Pakistani. So I would like to say that even if we have an identity, Bengali Muslim identity specific, you at the end of your talk you mentioned that we wouldn't be able to say that this identity will remain as something essential. If in future people vote for the mullahs, what we are going to say? But could we have any possibility to have a kind of evolution of the Islamic identity in here? Could there be a Bengali Islam or something like that in future? So I'm sorry for asking two questions.
No, that's fine. That's good. Thank you for the questions. Firstly, you say
mass uprising.
Mass uprising or revolution. Okay, that's already I answered in different places. Look, every uprising has its potential to be a revolution. It has the July revolution. The July uprising definitely had moments when it could take a turn to revolution. Unfortunately, it didn't take a turn. And unfortunately, it didn't culminate it as a revolution because the organizers, they resorted to the political parties, existing bourgeois, nationalist, liberal political parties. They went to them. They went to the army. And you never know where from these advisors actually came. Who decided? If it's a revolution, the people should decide who would be the driving seat. If it's a revolution, the people would decide who would be the advisor. Who decided? Do you know how the advisor had been chosen? I don't know. So how can I say that this became a revolution? It had potentials. You can say a long, like you can say that it has got potential of a long revolution, which should unfold in the next 10 years or 15 years. Because the regime was there for 15 years. Why we are saying that after this time is over, the next morning will be a fine morning when everything will be like on its proper position. It's not like that. So the thing is, it's not revolution yet. There are elements of revolution, but there are elements of counter-revolution. There are elements of there are potentials of counter-revolutionary forces. there are, in this age of deep state, how can we be so romantic about using the word revolution? Deep state is in action, in everywhere. Globally, it's like that. So how can you say that this is revolution? This is my take. The second thing is, what was it?
Bengali essentialization.
Whether there is any chance of evolution of a Muslim identity. Well, the possibility has always been there. You can deny but South Asia, in South Asia, religion is a very strong element very strong configuring force of the society. And India has proven that already. Narendra Modi, with the nexus of the capitalist, and with the nexus of the religious extremists. So they bring up something. And basically, what Jaya Chatterjee argued, that it had always been there, even in the politics of Congress. Congress was also to compete, to beat the Hindu Mahasabha. Congress was also promoting Hindu nationalism. So basically that happened with our West Bengal. I often argue with my West Bengal friends that in province, in West Bengal, they promoted left politics. But for the center, they have chosen Congress, which was leaning toward Hindu nationalism. So the fate of India today, leading toward extreme Hindu nationalist country, our friends, our liberal progressive friends also have the responsibility. So these potentials has already been there. Whether the religious or communal politics will take over, a religious or communal essentializing Islamist identity will rise in this country, the potential is there. But that doesn't mean that every potential will be materialized. Many of my secular, progressive, skeptical friends, I often responded like this, that in this movement, there are layers of different, like even within the rights, there are different layers, multiple layers. So they will have their own take and they will battle with it, they will fight with each other. And that will create the space for the non-rights to make an alignment, to make a negotiation with the most liberal right ones and against the extreme ones. So it's not that everything, Sheikh Hasina is gone and everything will be right-wing politics, everything will be an Islamist politics. No, it's not that easy. Think about the biggest Islamist political party in Bangladesh, Jamaat-e-Islami, not even 10% vote they had previously. So it's not that. The thing is, religion is strong, and denying Pakistan doesn't mean that Bengali Muslims gave up their religion. Denying Pakistan doesn't mean that we all become secular. Secularism was our wish, but our educated middle class failed to connect with the larger mass. We had failed to connect. They were the ruler, they arranged their life, they configured their own lifestyle, they won their city, they won their class, but they miserably failed to take that ideology that they think is better, like not a particular religious identity, not a particular, it's transcending the religious identity. So they promoted the nationalist identity, but they failed. But the potential is still there. So in Bangladesh, Islamist politics can come, but it's not necessarily hard. Sorry.
Please go.
No, you can wrap it up.
Just signaling to
Should I wrap it up?
Of course.
I just wanted to point out something. That in West Bengal, and this is from my own experience, that Bengali is equivalent to Hindu.
Exactly.
You cannot be a Bengali Muslim. If you're Muslim, you're Muslim. And if you're Bengali, Bengali means Hindu. And that goes back many years. When you read Sharat Chandra, Srikanto. You know, Srikanto means Indranil or Indranil in a football match. When you go to watch a football match, and the match is between Bangali and Musulman.
Yes.
So
no, it's the football team.
Exclusive claim to Bangaliism.
Our colleague and friend Al Mamun from BRAC University, he was doing PhD with Gautam Bhadra, and he rented a house in Calcutta. So the landlord and the landlady is very kind to Mamun and his wife and their children. So they often keep saying to Mamun, "Oh, you know, তোমাদেরকে দেখলে কখনো মনে হয় না যে তোমরা বাঙালি না." Mamun was shocked because in Bangladesh, Mamun only can see himself as a Bengali, not a Muslim. And in West Bengal, suddenly he is not a Bengali. It's there.
So best I have heard is Musulman Hindu.
Does that bring into, the question that comes up as complementary to what Akka just said, that the responsibility of the Bangladesh state to connect the Muslim and the Bengali identity, where have we failed as intellectuals? Why has it happened?
It's very simple. The entire thesis goes along that because we subscribe to where we feel comfort. We try to stick to our comfort zone, which is secular progressive narrative, and that fits with the typical narrative of partition. Instead of claiming that what's the problem historically, like the historical differences between what Azim was saying, the historical differences had always been there. When Abu Mansur Ahmed, in his childhood, living in a remote Bangladeshi village, he discovered that in his childhood he had this rhyme that Allah jodi kore to পশ্চিম যাইব পশ্চিমে যায় শিখে শহীদ যুদ্ধ করিব জিহাদ করিব বাঁচলে শহীদ মরলে গাজী মরলে শহীদ বাঁচলে গাজী. So at that time he noticed there is this story. He noticed that the zamindar's nine who came for fishing in their pond, in their family pond, is treating the tenant, his dada, in a very way. Like his dada is very much older than the nine, but the nine is addressing dada as Tui. And the nine was basically dictating him, "Hey, Chokra, you are getting too many fish. What material are you using? So give them to." He was like, he couldn't take that tone, and he was revolted. And then he called upon his dada, Abu Musliman's dada, and he was treating the dada as Tuitokari. He was doing the Tuitokari dada, and Abu Muslim was saying that his dada was saying, "He is older than you. Why you are doing this beadabi with him?" And he said, "You are much senior to him. Why he is saying you as Tui? Why he is addressing you as Tui?" So Bengali Muslim from long had this feeling that they have been treated badly by Hindus. And then there is this Shahidullah's famous tradition that when we go to the literary conferences, we have this feeling that Boroloke Apniye Boshe Dawat Khete. So this historical fault line had always been there. It's not that we are not promoting the bifurcated thing. We are not promoting the divergence, but this is historically fault and acknowledge that, address that. There's no way to bypass it. We wanted to be transcending. We look for a transcending identity of Bengalis, but then we miserably failed. Like when Faraday had been killed on the border, apart from Kobi Shumon, which intellectual or which artist, which friend of us from West Bengal raised their voice? They played along the state line, nationalist line. They didn't play for, they didn't go for a Bengali identity. So it's interesting that this is historical. It's not cultivating bitterness, or it's not cultivating rivalry or antagonism, but it's addressing the historical differences. I think that's necessary.
But there is an othering in it. I just was thinking of an example from Poland. You're asked, are you a Polak or a Žida? Are you a Pole or a Jew? There are also
Definitely.
for hundreds of years.
Yeah. Because the Jew is the
I just have a question because we are speaking of the othering. So I did most of my research of Mazar culture in Bangladesh. Most of my thesis was spent in trying to describe what does it mean to be a Bengali Muslim, because from the Bengali perspective, having a Muslim identity is something that is borrowed from others who have, traveled from Iran or Baghdad and all of those things. And then again, from the Bengali Muslim perspective, they spend their whole lives trying to basically describe why they're also Bengali. So when do we get away from these labeling, and why is it necessary to basically have a distinguished identity of Bengali Muslim? Why does it need to be separated, or just to be proved from either sides? From the Bengalis, you have to prove them. For the Muslims, you have to prove them, and there's always this hierarchy. If you're a Bengali Muslim, you're kind of like a less syncretistic Muslims, right? So, obviously, history is necessary, but at what point in history do we go beyond it, right?
To go beyond, the only way to go beyond is to address that it had been there, and to embrace both. To embrace both. It's to embrace Calcutta as well, because our childhood was formed with elements from Shishindu or Shomresh, or like our parents listened to Manna De. We used to listen to Manna De, Hemanto, and then Kavi Shumon, and these days Shumlaka. Why would we have to deny that? That is also us. That is also our part. We should embrace that too. But we should embrace that we had culinary from Middle East. We had things, or we had customs from other parts of the globe, which is why you have to be born from this thing. This particular idea that Islam is not homegrown here. Who's saying about this homegrown thing? The Bengaliness is homegrown. This Hajar Bachar Bengali better should also be disbanded. And it's better to embrace both. That's the only way.
I have just started a opposite question of starting up. So I was just thinking that, so she was asking if as academics we have failed or not. So I was wondering, do we matter as academics in terms of shaping the politics that plays out in the street?
No, yeah, how I should treat your question? Yes, definitely we shouldn't overemphasize our importance. We shouldn't be very happy that we are someone. After the long July, many would say, why the teachers network didn't get this and that? And then, because they did a lot, and the teachers, our friends and colleagues in the teachers network who were on the street, we thought, yes, we did a lot. But think what actually had happened. People did much more bigger things than us. People sacrificed much more than we did a little. So yes, sometimes we probably tend to glorify, to overemphasize our importance. But on a serious note, as scholars, we definitely have responsibilities. We definitely have responsibilities because we leave things behind. We write, we publish, and that affects, that transcends. So this is important because this trajectory of writing a narrow narrative of South Asian studies, writing an Indo-centric narrative of partition studies, completely ruin our popular understanding as well. It's not only that, look at the commercial making of commercial film Raj Kahani now, and compare with the partition movies of Mrinal Sen. So Mrinal Sen was a master filmmaker, and he was master in his time. But think about Raj Kahani, which is a pretty commercial thing of this time, but see how Raj Kahani could accommodate the complexities of partition, and how Mrinal Sen's one was very straight and very singular narrative based on a singular narrative. So this is a different time. Time helps us to learn. Time helps us. The history unfolds, we travel through that, and we get enriched. And this is our responsibility. If we can see that changes are happening, it is our responsibility to note that, to write it down, to speak about that. This is our responsibility.
Do you have any more questions, any comments, any more?
Maybe a comment.
Comment.
So maybe a comment.
Yeah, go on.
So I'm very happy that someone actually had, I should say, the academic honesty and the guts to speak on this subject so openly, so frankly. You were talking about, and what Asif said, do academics even matter when we write? And so I have been researching this topic, and I have published 3 papers in international journals, but I've always met with stiff resistance, and the only appreciation that I got was from abroad. I've had professors writing to me from European universities, from Indian universities, wanting to collaborate on projects. I had to say no. Man wanted me to take my work forward and maybe do a PhD or something on it, but I had to give up because of this stiff resistance that I met with. And I agree with what Azim said about finding ways, finding strategies. And maybe this is what Emily Dickinson meant. And she said, say it all, but say it slant. So maybe that's what you are.
Definitely. Van Schendel, an extensive researcher on Bengal borderline and Bengal borderline. So Van Schendel said that Bengal borderline is a hotbed of like small arms trafficking. Now Van Schendel is not from this society. He's saying that about your state, about your society. And we, the academia in Bangladesh, is so nationalist, so petty nationalist, so damn nationalist, that we don't want to acknowledge that. And that's our fault. What's the problem? If your country has this, you should write this. Is it glorious that you are concealing it and somebody else coming from abroad and writing this off? What's the point? So our academia needs to gather that courage, needs to grow up, basically. Needs to grow up and needs to be academically committed rather than being reside within this niche of nationalist, statist, deficit.
So with that, we draw this wonderful keynote to a close. We have another session downstairs in our department. So I would encourage everybody to go there because it is going to be a very interesting one with our own Thomas presenting on his research and 2 people joining us from online and with Professor Azim who shall moderate the session. So please join us and we have to make our way downstairs. Please don't go away. Thank you. So we go down.